Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really wild and, you could say, deeply controversial idea. What if the blueprint for life, our actual DNA, was intentionally written down, encoded in an ancient book?
Just think about that for a second. What if the secrets of our biology, our health, our looks, all of the traits we inherit weren't just discovered by scientists in a lab, but were actually laid out thousands of years ago, just waiting for someone to crack the code?
Well, that is the absolutely staggering claim at the heart of a book called The Tablet of Life. It argues that a divine genetic code is deliberately embedded, almost like a secret message, in the verses of ancient scripture. So today, we're going to walk through exactly how the author tries to make that case.
So how in the world do you even begin to build an argument like this? It's a huge claim, right? Well, the author says you have to start with a logical process, and that whole process begins with a search for the right manuscript.
The thinking goes like this. If you're looking for a genuine divine message among all the world's sacred texts, you can't just pick one you like. You need a system, a strict set of rules to act as a filter, to weed out the ones that don't fit, and logically narrow down the possibilities.
To do this, the book lays out a framework of 4 specific tests. First, the text has to claim it's a direct message from God, not just a story about God. Second, it has to exist in one single, definitive version, without any mistakes in the language. Third, it needs to be perfectly preserved and still available in its original, untranslated language. And fourth, and this is the big one, the one the whole argument rests on, it has to contain what the author calls miraculous scientific evidence as proof of its divine origin.
So, after applying this 4-part filter to all the major religious texts, the author comes to a conclusion. Only one book, they claim, passes all 4 tests, the Arabic Quran. So according to the book's logic, this singles it out as the one and only candidate for holding this divine code.
Okay, so if the Quran is the tablet, then the next question is obvious. What's the map? What part of our biology is it supposed to be describing? This is where the theory gets even more specific.
You have to wonder, right? Is it supposed to be the entire human genome? All 3 billion letters of our genetic code? The author says no. That would be pretty impractical. Instead, the book suggests the code corresponds to one very specific and incredibly important part of our genome.
So why the X chromosome? Well, the book lays out a few reasons. Sure, it's essential for things like reproduction and brain function, but the author really zeroes in on the fact that the X chromosome is linked to a disproportionate number of intellectual disabilities and is the source of so many rare genetic diseases. It's this link to human suffering, the author argues, that makes it the most logical place for a divine message to be hidden.
Now we get to the first major piece of evidence, which is this claim of a direct structural parallel. So, you know how an X chromosome is built, right? It's got a long arm and a short arm, and they're separated by this little pinch point called the centromere. Well, the author claims that this structure perfectly mirrors the Quran, which they describe as also having long and short sections separated by a chapter whose name literally translates to the divider. The argument here is that this isn't a coincidence. It's by design.
With the book chosen and the chromosome identified, we finally get to the heart of the claim. Let's dig into the specific examples of evidence that the author puts forward to connect these two things.
So the method they use is basically one of direct comparison. The author takes the meaning of a specific verse from the Quran, sometimes it's literal, sometimes metaphorical, and tries to match it up with the real-world clinical symptoms of a known genetic disorder that's traced back to the X chromosome.
Let's look at the first example from the book. It centers on this verse, which is part of a prayer, and loosen a knot from my tongue.
The author links that verse directly to a medical condition called ankylosing, which you probably know as tied tongue. And this condition is in fact caused by a mutation in the TBX22 gene, which is located on the X chromosome. The claim is that the phrase "a knot from my tongue" is a perfect pre-scientific description of this exact genetic issue.
Okay, a second example shifts from a physical trait to behavior. The book points to this verse describing the Pharaoh's actions, extreme violence and aggression, labeling him one of the devastators.
This description of violent behavior is then connected to the MAOA gene, which is also on the X chromosome. Now, you might have heard of this one before.
In some scientific studies, a certain version of this gene has been nicknamed the warrior gene because of its link to higher levels of aggression.
The final example from the book we'll look at has to do with perception. It's about a story where a group of people are trying to find a cow of a very specific color, but they're struggling and they say the cows look like to us. The author connects this difficulty in telling colors apart to the OPN1W gene, again on the X chromosome. A mutation in this gene can cause something called monochromacy, which is a very severe type of color blindness where it's hard to distinguish between hues at all. To that person, different colors could literally look alike.
So, what's the point of all this? According to the book, it's not just some interesting puzzle. The author suggests this discovery could act as a kind of genetic Rosetta Stone.
This brings us to the author's ultimate goal, which is presented as something really practical. The theory is that if this connection is real, then this ancient text could be used as a map to guide modern science, helping researchers speed up the process of finding disease-causing genes and maybe even developing new treatment.
If this were true, the book says the implications would be just profound. It's pitched as a way to finally build a bridge between science and religion, and even as a way to scientifically talk about concepts like life after death. But the main goal, the stated purpose, is medical. To use this ancient wisdom to push modern genetics forward and, hopefully, help relieve suffering from these terrible genetic disorders.
And so, the Tablet of Life leaves us all with one final and very provocative question to chew on. Could sacred texts, when you look at them through this very unique and yes, highly controversial lens, actually hold an unexpected key to the future of genetic medicine? It's a fascinating, if debatable, thought to end on.